The alien queen, betrayed and bleeding, murmured, "Human, you must not handle me." The spaceship had been traveling for days through the silent void of space, moving steadily toward its destination. Alex sat by the window, watching the distant stars flicker as the ship cut through the darkness. The mission was simple: negotiate a peace treaty with the Xylarans, an ancient alien species with technology far beyond human understanding. The Xylarans had been at war with the nearby Graxians for years, and the humans were called in to mediate. Alex, a diplomat by training, had been selected for his calm demeanor and skill at navigating difficult situations. He glanced at the console beside him, where a small blinking light indicated that they were nearing the Xylaran homeworld. A voice crackled through the intercom. "Approaching Xylaran system, Captain. All systems are operational." "Thank you," Alex replied, tapping his fingers nervously on the armrest. This was his first time on an alien world. The Xylarans were known for their ruthless nature and unyielding strength. He wondered how they would respond to humans, how they would view his efforts to bring peace. Would they see him as a pawn, or as someone capable of bridging the gap between two warring empires? As the ship entered the Xylaran atmosphere, Alex's thoughts turned to the Queen. Kuhira, the ruler of the Xylarans, had earned a reputation as both a brilliant strategist and a fierce warrior. The peace talks would be difficult, but Alex had a feeling that Kuhira might be different from what the reports suggested. She wasn't just a leader. She was a force of nature. The ship landed with a soft thud, and Alex quickly gathered his things. The airlock hissed open, and he stepped out onto the landing pad, his boots clicking on the metal surface. The alien world was unlike anything he had ever seen. The sky was a deep purple, and the distant mountains towered like jagged teeth against the horizon. The ground was covered in strange, luminescent plants that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Everything felt foreign, and for the first time, Alex felt the weight of the mission pressing down on him. A delegation of Xylarans stood waiting, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The leader, a tall figure with sleek silver skin and glowing blue markings, stepped forward. "Human," the leader said in a voice that was both harsh and regal, "you are welcome here, but you must understand that our ways are not your ways. Do not expect us to bow to your diplomacy." Alex nodded, doing his best to keep his nerves in check. "I understand," he said. "I'm here to facilitate a peaceful resolution, nothing more." The Xylaran leader stared at him for a moment before turning, signaling for the group to follow. Alex kept pace with them, his mind racing. This was it, the moment that could either end in peace or disaster. The fate of many lives rested on his shoulders. They walked through the halls of the palace, a massive structure made of black stone and shimmering glass. The walls were adorned with alien art, images of battles long past, and strange symbols that Alex couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't just a palace, it was a monument to the Xylarans' long and violent history. Finally, they reached the throne room. It was a vast, open space with towering pillars that stretched up to a ceiling lost in shadow. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform, sat Queen Kuhira. Her appearance was striking. Her skin was a deep shade of indigo, and her long hair flowed like liquid silver. Her eyes, glowing with an inner fire, fixed on Alex as he entered. "Human," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "You have come to speak of peace, but you are not the first to try. Do you think you can succeed where others have failed?" Alex stepped forward, keeping his voice steady. "I don't know if I can succeed, Your Majesty. But I believe we have to try. We can't keep fighting forever. There's too much at stake." Kuhira studied him for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. "You speak of peace, but you do not understand the true nature of our struggle. The Xylarans are not a race of diplomats. We are warriors, we are survivors. Peace is a luxury we cannot afford." Alex felt the weight of her words. He had read about the Xylarans, their history of war and conquest. They had fought countless battles, not for glory, but for survival. The Graxians were their enemies, and the cycle of violence had lasted for centuries. How could he possibly change something so deeply ingrained? "Perhaps," Alex said carefully, "but every war ends eventually, either in victory or in devastation. Do you really want to keep fighting, Your Majesty? Is that the future you want for your people?" Kuhira's eyes flickered with something that might have been doubt, or perhaps it was just the weight of the years of war bearing down on her. "You are naive, human," she said, standing up slowly from her throne. "But I will listen to what you have to say, for now." The peace talks began in earnest after that, though it was clear that Q-Hira was not entirely convinced. The discussions were tense, each word measured carefully, each side unwilling to give an inch. Alex found himself constantly on edge, aware that one wrong move could ruin everything. But despite the tension, there was something about Q-Hira's demeanor that made him believe she was not entirely opposed to the idea of peace. She didn't want war, but she didn't know how to escape from it either. Hours passed, and the conversation continued, until at last, it became clear that the talks were about to reach a critical juncture. Just as Alex was about to make his next proposal, the doors to the throne room suddenly burst open, and a group of Xylaran soldiers stormed in. Their weapons were drawn, their faces cold with malice. "Your Majesty," one of them shouted, "you are under arrest for treason." The words struck Alex like a blow. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Q-Hira, a traitor, it didn't make sense. She had been the leader of her people for decades. There was no way she could have betrayed them, but the soldiers were relentless, their eyes filled with anger. Q-Hira stood tall, unflinching. "What is this?" she demanded. "What is the meaning of this madness?" "Your actions have been deemed treasonous," the soldier replied, his voice filled with contempt. "The council has voted. You are to be removed from power." In a flash, the room erupted into chaos. The soldiers closed in on Q-Hira, and Alex could see the rage in her eyes. She fought back, her movements swift and precise, but the soldiers were too many. They overpowered her quickly, forcing her to her knees. Blood trickled from a wound on her side, staining the black stone floor. Alex's heart raced. He knew that the situation had just taken a terrible turn. This wasn't just a political move. This was an assassination. They were going to kill her. Without thinking, Alex rushed forward. He didn't know what he was doing, but he couldn't stand by and watch the woman who had shown him a glimpse of something more fall at the hands of these traitors. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice filled with urgency. But the soldiers ignored him, their weapons raised. In the chaos, Q-Hira turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting his. "Human," she murmured weakly, her voice barely audible. "You must not handle me." But Alex didn't listen. He lunged at the nearest soldier, knocking him aside. He had no weapon, no real training, but his desperation fueled him. He had to protect her. He had to stop this. The fight didn't last long. Outnumbered and outgunned, Alex was quickly subdued. The last thing he saw before he was dragged away was Q-Hira, still kneeling, blood pooling around her. The betrayal was complete, and the Xylaran queen was no longer the ruler she had once been. Alex awoke to the sharp sound of metal clanging against stone. His head was throbbing and his vision was blurry. He tried to move, but his arms were bound to a cold, hard surface. For a moment, panic gripped him as he realized he was trapped. He struggled against the restraints, but the more he fought, the tighter they seemed to become. His mind raced, but it wasn't until the memory of what had happened earlier came flooding back that he understood the gravity of the situation. Q-Hira, the queen, she had been taken. Blood, betrayal. The soldiers, her own people, had turned against her. Alex had tried to stop them, but there had been too many. His body ached and his heart felt heavy with the weight of failure. His surroundings were dark, the air thick with a metallic scent. He could hear distant voices, muffled and unintelligible. The room was cold, and the only light came from small, flickering lamps on the walls. He tried to focus, but his mind kept slipping back to Q-Hira's last words. "You must not handle me." The words haunted him. Why had she said that? Was she afraid? Or was there something more to her message? His thoughts were interrupted when the door to the chamber creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. A Xylaran soldier, tall and imposing, moved toward him. Alex's eyes narrowed in defiance, but he kept his mouth shut. He knew he was at the mercy of these people now. There was nothing he could say to change their minds. The soldier leaned down, his voice cold. "The queen will die unless you do as we say." Alex's stomach turned at the mention of Q-Hira's fate. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice rough from the tension in his throat. The soldier straightened, his expression unreadable. "You will help us remove the threat she poses. You will convince her to surrender, or you will watch her die. Either way, her blood will be on your hands." Alex's chest tightened. The words hit him like a blow. He wouldn't be part of Q-Hira's destruction, but what choice did he have? The Xylarans were ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to eliminate her. And yet something inside him stirred. The human part of him, the diplomat, the one who believed in peace, refused to accept this fate. He had to find a way to save her. The soldier turned and left, locking the door behind him. Alex was left alone in the dark, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He didn't know how to save Kuhira, but he couldn't let her die, not like this, not because of betrayal. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Alex lost track of time, his mind swirling with thoughts of escape, of redemption, of finding a way to protect Kuhira. He thought back to their conversations, to the way she had spoken about the Xylaran code, about the honor and strength that defined her people. Was there a way to use that knowledge to his advantage? Just when he thought he might lose his mind from the waiting, the door opened again. This time, it was Kuhira herself who stepped inside. She was no longer the powerful, regal figure he had seen earlier. Her once pristine appearance was marred by blood, dirt, and bruises. Her clothes were torn and her silver hair hung in disarray. She moved slowly with a visible limp, her face pale and drawn from the pain. Alex's heart sank at the sight of her. He had never seen her like this before, vulnerable, broken, the mighty queen of the Xylarans reduced to this. She stopped just in front of him, her gaze cold but intense. "I told you not to handle me," she said, her voice strained but still filled with authority. "And now you've made things worse." Alex swallowed hard. "I didn't have a choice," he said quietly. "I couldn't just stand by and let them kill you." Kuhira's eyes flickered with something. Was it pain or regret? She didn't say anything at first. Instead, she took a step closer, examining him closely. "You still don't understand, do you?" she murmured. "You're a human, you're weak, your kind is fragile, you can't handle the weight of what's coming." Alex didn't know what to say. He had always believed that humans had the strength to overcome any obstacle, that their willpower could shape the future. But standing here now, facing this alien queen who had seen more than he could ever imagine, he wasn't sure of anything anymore. Kuhira's gaze softened just for a moment. "I told you not to handle me because that's what happens to humans who try to interfere in Xylaran affairs. We fight, we survive, but we do it alone." She paused, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were never meant to be part of this." Her words cut deeper than anything he had ever heard. She was right in a way. He was an outsider, a stranger to their culture, to their pain. He could never truly understand what it meant to be a Xylaran, to carry the weight of an empire on your shoulders. But he couldn't just walk away either. Not now, not when he had already seen what was at stake. "I'm not leaving," Alex said firmly, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "I'm not leaving you to die, Kuhira. I'll find a way to stop this." She studied him for a long time, her expression unreadable. "You think you can stop this?" she asked, her tone both challenging and curious. "You think you can change the course of my people's destiny with your human ideals?" "I don't know," Alex admitted. "But I have to try. You've been betrayed, and I won't let them win." For a long moment, there was silence between them. Then, Kuhira nodded slowly, as if she were considering his words. She reached down and carefully untied the bindings on his wrists, her fingers surprisingly gentle despite the circumstances. "Then you'll need more than just words, human," she said quietly. "You'll need to understand what you're up against, and you'll need to make a choice that might cost you everything." Alex rubbed his wrists, his heart racing. He didn't know what she meant, but he could see the seriousness in her eyes. He had never felt more uncertain in his life. Yet in that moment, he also knew one thing for sure. He couldn't leave her, not when there was still a chance to save her, to stop the war, to make things right. "I'll do whatever it takes," Alex said, his voice resolute. Kuhira studied him for a moment longer before nodding once more. "Very well, but be prepared, human. You may find that the cost of this war is higher than you're willing to pay." As she turned to leave, Alex's mind raced with the weight of her words. He didn't know what was coming next, but he knew that this was no longer just a diplomatic mission. It was a fight for survival, for both of them. And somehow, despite everything, Alex couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. He didn't know how they would survive, but he would be damned if he didn't try. The days blended into one another as Alex and Kuhira moved deeper into the heart of the Xylaran wilderness. The planet was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. The landscape was vast and unforgiving, filled with jagged cliffs, dark forests, and rivers that flowed with an eerie, glowing light. Despite the beauty, the world felt hostile, alive with dangers that both Alex and Kuhira were all too aware of. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the strange, alien sounds of creatures lurking just beyond their sight. Kuhira was still weak from her injuries, but her pride refused to allow her to show it. She moved with grace, even as her limp became more noticeable with every step. Alex could see the strain in her eyes, but she never asked for help. Instead, she remained distant, focused solely on the path ahead. It was clear she didn't trust him completely, yet there was something different in the way she looked at him now. Perhaps she was starting to believe that, despite everything, he might be able to help her. They hadn't spoken much since their last conversation. The silence between them was thick, filled with the unspoken tension of two people from entirely different worlds who had been thrust together by circumstance. Alex kept his thoughts to himself, but the weight of his emotions bore down on him. He had never imagined that peace would be so complicated. When he had been chosen for this mission, he had believed that diplomacy was simply about understanding others, finding common ground. But now, as he traveled through the wilderness with Kuhira, he realized that peace was more than words. It was a battle, an internal war as much as an external one. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth when they came across a small, abandoned settlement. The huts were built into the sides of towering rock formations, their windows dark and empty. The place felt abandoned, as if the inhabitants had left in a hurry. Kuhira paused at the entrance, scanning the area with a sharp, calculating gaze. Her body stiffened as though she had sensed something he hadn't. "We should be careful here," she murmured, her voice low and cautious. "This place is not safe." Alex nodded, but he didn't ask why. He had learned by now that Kuhira's warnings were always grounded in experience. Instead, he followed her as she moved cautiously through the settlement, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The silence was oppressive, and Alex's nerves began to tingle with unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They passed through the settlement without incident, but just as they were about to leave, a sudden noise broke the stillness. It was a sharp, high-pitched sound, almost like a screech, followed by the sound of something heavy moving through the trees. Before Alex could react, Kuhira was already in motion, drawing a sleek black weapon from her side. She moved with the fluidity of someone who had fought countless battles, her body coiled like a predator about to strike. "Stay behind me," she ordered, her voice sharp. Alex didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee, scanning the forest for any sign of movement. He could see nothing, but the air was thick with tension. Then, out of nowhere, a creature lunged from the underbrush, its eyes glowing an unnatural red. It was massive, easily twice the size of a human, with long, spiny limbs and sharp claws that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Its mouth was full of jagged teeth, and its roar shook the ground beneath them. Kuhira reacted instantly. She fired a single shot, hitting the creature in the side with a precision that took Alex's breath away. The beast staggered, but it didn't go down. Instead, it let out another screech, more furious than before. It charged at them, its claws slashing through the air. Without thinking, Alex reached for his sidearm, but it wasn't there. He had forgotten to bring it. There had been no time. Panic surged in his chest as he realized that he was unarmed. But before he could make a move, Kuhira was already in front of him, blocking his path. "Stay back," she ordered again, her voice steely and confident. She didn't wait for his response. She moved to meet the creature head-on, her movements fluid and precise. Alex watched in awe as she danced around the creature's claws, each strike landing with deadly accuracy. The creature roared again, but Kuhira was relentless. She dodged its attacks with the grace of a dancer, each motion calculated and purposeful. The battle was over in seconds. With one final, precise strike, Kuhira pierced the creature's skull, dropping it to the ground with a heavy thud. She stood over it for a moment, her breathing heavy, her chest rising and falling as she wiped the blood from her blade. Alex couldn't help but stare, his mind racing to keep up with the sheer intensity of what he had just witnessed. "Are you all right?" Kuhira asked, her voice calm despite the violence she had just unleashed. Alex nodded, though he felt a lump form in his throat. "Yeah, I'm fine." "Just surprised." Kuhira gave him a look, her eyes sharp and assessing. "You should have expected it. This world is full of dangers." Alex nodded again, his thoughts swirling. He couldn't understand how someone like Kuhira, someone so fierce, so powerful, could be so vulnerable. The battle had been over quickly, but her injuries were still there, hidden beneath the surface. Her pride kept her from showing it, but Alex could see the toll the betrayal had taken on her. "We should keep moving," Kuhira said, turning away from the fallen creature. She didn't wait for him to respond. She just started walking again, her steps steady and purposeful. Alex followed her, his mind still reeling from the fight. It had been quick and brutal, but it wasn't the battle that was weighing on him. It was Kuhira. She was a warrior, undeniably strong, but she was also alone. She didn't have anyone to rely on, not anymore. Her people had betrayed her, and now she was running, hiding, and fighting to survive. And Alex, for all his human resilience, was out of his depth. He didn't know how to help her. He didn't know how to fight for her the way she fought for herself. They walked for hours without speaking. The landscape had changed, the terrain becoming more rugged and desolate. The air was thinner, colder, and Alex could feel his energy draining with every step. He wasn't used to this kind of physical strain, but he kept pushing forward. Kuhira was ahead of him, her pace unbroken. She seemed like a shadow, slipping through the alien world with ease, while Alex struggled just to keep up. As night fell, they found a small cave to rest in. The stars above were bright, but the air was colder now, and Alex could feel the chill creeping into his bones. They built a small fire, the warmth slowly creeping into their muscles. Kuhira didn't speak, but she kept a close watch on their surroundings, her eyes scanning the darkness with an intensity that reminded Alex just how dangerous this world was. "I don't know how much further we can go," Alex said, finally breaking the silence. "We're not safe here." Kuhira turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You think I don't know that?" she said, her voice colder than the night air. "But we don't have a choice. We have to keep moving." Alex nodded, understanding the weight of her words. She wasn't just running from the Xylaran soldiers who had betrayed her. She was running from everything, the past, the future, and everything she had once believed in. She had no place in this world anymore, and Alex couldn't help but feel the burden of that loss. The fire crackled, and the night stretched on, silent and heavy. As the flames flickered, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were both on the edge of something they couldn't control. And yet, despite everything, there was a part of him that still believed they could make it out of this alive, if they worked together. The darkness pressed in around them, but Alex held onto that small, fragile hope. For the first time since arriving on this alien world, he began to understand what it truly meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. And in that moment, as the fire burned low and the stars watched overhead, Alex knew that the real battle was just beginning. The days had become a blur of motion, each one blending into the next as they moved deeper into the wilderness. The landscape around them had shifted once again, the towering trees now replaced by sweeping plains and jagged rock formations that seemed to stretch on forever. The air had grown colder, and Alex could feel the chill creeping into his bones. His body ached from the constant travel, his muscles stiff from the strain. But still he pushed forward, determined to keep moving. Kuhira had grown quieter over the past few days. She had always been reserved, but now her silence seemed heavier, more distant. She had stopped talking about the Xylaran Empire, about her people, and about the betrayal that had led to her fall. Instead, she focused solely on survival, her mind always calculating the next step, the next danger. Alex couldn't help but wonder what was going on inside her head. He had seen her fight with a cold, ruthless efficiency, but he had also seen glimpses of something else, a weariness in her eyes, a sadness that she kept hidden beneath the surface. She had lost everything, her throne, her people, her power. And now, as they traveled through this alien world, it seemed like she was just waiting for the inevitable. He didn't know how to help her. He didn't know how to ease the burden she carried. But he couldn't leave her, not when she was the only chance humanity had of forming a meaningful alliance with the Xylarans. Without her, there was no peace. Without her, there was nothing. The nights were the hardest. As the sun set and the darkness closed in around them, the weight of their situation felt heavier. The fire crackled softly between them, casting long shadows on the walls of the cave they had taken refuge in. Kuhira sat across from Alex, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. She was staring into the fire, lost in thought, her fingers lightly tracing the hilt of her weapon. Alex shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. It had been days since their last conversation, and he could feel the tension building between them. They were allies now, but the distance between them was undeniable. He wasn't sure how much longer they could continue like this, with silence growing thicker each day. Finally, unable to bear the quiet any longer, Alex spoke. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but steady. Kuhira didn't respond right away. She continued to stare at the fire, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Alex wondered if she had even heard him. Then, without looking up, she spoke. "There is nothing to talk about," she said, her voice flat. "We keep moving." We keep surviving, that is all. Alex frowned. He could feel the walls she had built around herself, and it hurt to see her so closed off. He had hoped that, after everything they had been through, she might start to open up, even just a little. But she had retreated even further into herself. We can't just keep running, Alex said, his frustration bubbling to the surface. We can't just keep surviving, Kuhira. We have to do something. We can't let them win. Kuhira finally looked up at him, her gaze piercing. You don't understand, she said quietly. You don't understand what it means to be a leader, to be responsible for the lives of millions. When you fall, they all fall with you. There is no coming back from that. Alex swallowed, his throat tight. He hadn't realized how deeply the betrayal had affected her. He had seen her as a fierce warrior, someone who could handle anything that came her way. But now he saw the depth of her pain, the weight of the responsibility she had carried for so long. I know what it feels like to fail, Alex said quietly. I know what it's like to be responsible for people's lives, but that's not the end. You don't just give up, you fight. You don't let them win. Kuhira was silent for a long moment, her eyes locked on his. For the first time, Alex thought he saw something flicker in her gaze, something soft, something human. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cold, calculating focus that had become her mask. We fight because there is no other choice, she said, her voice firm once again. But you must understand, Alex, it's not just about fighting. It's about knowing when to let go, knowing when to accept that the war is lost, that sometimes survival is all that matters. Alex shook his head. That's not what you really want, Kuhira. You don't want to just survive. You want your people to thrive. You want to rebuild what was lost. Her eyes softened for a moment, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the fire, her face hidden in the shadows. Alex could tell she was battling something inside herself, something she didn't want to acknowledge. I don't know what happened to you or what your people have done to you, but you're not alone, Alex said softly. You don't have to do this by yourself. Kuhira looked up at him, her expression unreadable. You think I can just trust you? She asked, her voice sharp. You think that after everything that's happened, I can just rely on a human? Alex met her gaze, his expression unwavering. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to fight alongside me. We're both on the same side now, whether you like it or not. And I'm not giving up on you, not now, not ever. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled between them, the only sound in the cave. Kuhira's gaze flickered to the flames, her mind clearly elsewhere. Alex waited, giving her the space she needed to process. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer than before. You think I'm the only one who's lost something? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. You think I'm the only one who's been betrayed, that I'm the only one who's had to watch everything I built crumble to dust? Alex didn't know how to respond. He wanted to tell her that he understood, that he knew what it felt like to lose everything. But he knew that his loss would never compare to hers. He couldn't imagine the weight of being the leader of an entire empire, only to have it torn away by those you trusted most. Instead, he simply said, I know you've lost a lot, but you're still here, you're still fighting, and that counts for something. Kuhira didn't answer right away. She sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the fire, her expression distant. Alex couldn't help but wonder if he had said the wrong thing, if he had pushed her too far. But then, just as he was about to speak again, she turned to him. You're right, she said quietly. I'm still here and I'm still fighting, but I won't fight alone, not anymore. Alex's heart lifted at her words. For the first time in days, it felt like they were on the same page, like they were no longer two strangers caught in a desperate struggle. They were allies now, partners, and together they might just have a chance. The fire crackled in the silence, and for the first time in a long while, Alex felt like there was hope. Hope that they could make it through this. Hope that they could survive. And maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from the ashes of what had been lost. The days were beginning to blur together as Alex and Kuhira moved further into the heart of the Xylaran wilderness. The landscape had become even more hostile, the terrain a maze of sharp rocks and treacherous cliffs that seemed determined to test their every step. The air was thinner, and the cold had begun to seep into their bones. The once vibrant alien world now felt like a prison, a place where survival was the only thing that mattered. But despite the harshness of their surroundings, Alex could sense a shift between him and Kuhira. The tension that had hung between them had started to lessen, replaced by a quiet understanding. They had fought together, survived together, and though they were from two entirely different worlds, they had begun to rely on one another. It wasn't much, but it was something. They had stopped speaking about the past, about the betrayal that had torn her world apart. Instead, they focused on the present, finding shelter, food, and avoiding the constant danger that lurked around every corner. It was clear now that Kuhira had stopped thinking of herself as a ruler. She had become something else, someone who was simply trying to survive. And for the first time since Alex had met her, she didn't seem so distant. There was still the strength and pride that defined her, but now there was also a vulnerability, a recognition that she didn't have to carry the weight of everything alone. Alex found himself thinking more about her than he cared to admit. He had always seen her as the fierce queen, the ruler of an empire. But now, as they trudged through the harsh terrain, he was beginning to see the woman behind the title. The woman who had lost everything, who had been betrayed by her own people, and who now had to fight to reclaim what was hers. The air grew colder as the night approached, the sky darkening quickly overhead. The stars were out in full force, their pale light casting a soft glow across the landscape. Alex and Kuhira had found another cave to rest in, this one larger and more protected from the wind. The fire crackled between them, providing the only warmth in the otherwise freezing air. Kuhira sat close to the fire, her eyes distant as she stared into the flames. Alex could see the tension in her posture, the way she held herself like a coiled spring, ready to react at the slightest provocation. He didn't know if she had ever truly relaxed since he'd met her, but he knew she wouldn't until she felt safe again. And that safety was something neither of them had found in a long time. "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it?" Alex asked, breaking the silence that had fallen over them. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. He hadn't meant to speak aloud, but the question had been nagging at him for days. Kuhira didn't look up at first, but after a long pause, she answered. "Wonder if it's worth what?" Alex shifted, uncomfortable. "All of this, the fighting, the running. The constant battle just to survive. Do you ever think about what happens after?" Kuhira was silent for a moment, her eyes still fixed on the fire. The wind outside howled, but inside the cave it was quiet, almost too quiet. "I think about it every day," she said softly, her voice tinged with something Alex couldn't quite place. "About my people, about my empire, about the life I had before all of this, before the betrayal." Alex listened closely, but he didn't interrupt. He had learned that sometimes silence was the best way to let someone talk, especially someone like Kuhira, who had so many walls built around her. "You know," Kuhira continued, her voice distant, "when you're in power, you think you have control. You think you can make decisions that will shape the future. But in the end, it's all out of your hands. No matter how hard you try to protect those you care about, there's always someone ready to tear it all down. And when it happens, you're left with nothing but ashes." Alex couldn't find the words to respond. He knew what she was feeling in some way. He'd seen his own world torn apart in different ways, wars, political upheaval, the constant push for power. But he had never experienced it the way Kuhira had. The loss she carried was different, heavier, because it was tied to the people she had once called her own. "Is it worth it?" Kuhira asked suddenly, turning her gaze to him. Her eyes gleamed in the firelight, searching, questioning. Alex didn't have a perfect answer. He didn't know if it was worth it. He didn't know if the pain of fighting for something that might never come back was worth the effort. But he knew one thing: he couldn't let her give up. "I don't know," he said, his voice steady despite the doubt in his chest. "But I know that if we stop now, if we give up, then we've lost for sure. And I don't think you're someone who gives up easily." Kuhira's eyes softened just slightly, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she looked back at the fire, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. The silence between them stretched on, but it was different this time. It wasn't uncomfortable or strained. It was just quiet, filled with the weight of their shared experiences. They didn't need to say anything more. Later that night, as they lay in the cave, trying to get some rest before the next day's journey, Alex found himself unable to sleep. His mind kept racing, spinning with thoughts of what they could do next, how they could survive. And then, as if the weight of the question had finally caught up with him, he realized something. They didn't have to survive alone anymore. For all their differences, they had become something more than just two people running from their pasts. They were a team, a fragile alliance forged by necessity, yes, but also by something deeper, a shared understanding of what it meant to fight for a future. As the first light of dawn crept into the cave, Alex sat up, rubbing his eyes. The wind had died down and the sky outside was clear. It would be a long day ahead, filled with more struggles and challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Alex felt a sense of purpose. Kuhira stirred beside him, waking up slowly, her eyes tired but determined. She didn't say anything at first, but when she looked at him, he could see the faintest flicker of something. A small sign of trust, perhaps, or even something more. She wasn't ready to fully open up, not yet, but she wasn't shutting him out anymore either. "We'll keep moving," she said softly, as if she had been reading his thoughts. "We'll get through this." Alex nodded, his heart steady. Together. For the first time, it felt like they had a chance, not just to survive, but to rebuild. To find a way forward, even if it meant fighting against everything that had come before. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew that they had each other. And in this world where everything seemed uncertain, that was enough. They packed their things and headed out, the journey ahead still uncertain but no longer hopeless. Together they would face whatever came next, one step at a time.